Fam, what's going on? It's Kyle Henderson and Clint Lamb coming to you from beautiful Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Alabama has added a transfer from the National Champs, Georgia, Trezmen Marshall, here with Clint Lamb to break it all down. What does it mean? Clint, give us your early take on Trezmen Marshall from a statistical standpoint and also what he brings to this Alabama defense. And by the way, he's already enrolled at Alabama.
Yeah, what a quick turn of events, right? I mean, we started hearing the possibility of Alabama being in play for him, and not only were they in play, but also, I mean, he was already committed. He was already enrolled in, at the University of Alabama. So that was quite shocking to, I think, pretty much everybody. But I think just from a fit, he makes sense from a lot of different standpoints, right? Because number one, typically it hadn't always been this way, but Nick Saban and Alabama's coaching staff normally likes to target guys in the transfer portal that they recruited out of high school, that they're kind of familiar with, comfortable with. They've kind of done their due diligence on them. So from that standpoint, that makes sense. I think he fits the culture and the expectations. When you bring in a guy like Eli Ricks, he came over from an Ed Orgeron run program, and no knock on Ed Orgeron, but it was just vastly different than what you see in Tuscaloosa under Nick Saban. Kirby Smart in Georgia run a very similar program. So, you're bringing in a guy who's familiar with the expectations, with the demands. That's certainly going to help. I think from an experience standpoint, it was absolutely huge to bring him in. You kind of keep that balance of experience and talent on your roster at that position. Because you lose Henry Toto, you lose Jalen Moody, Deontay Lawson. I thought it was big that they were able to get him the reps and the starts that they did this past year, but he's the only experienced guy on the roster. So they really needed a little bit more at that position. And then also he fits your system because he is coming over from Kirby Smart in Georgia. He's also familiar with what's going to be asked from a schematic standpoint defensively. So I think just he was the perfect fit. Makes a lot of sense, and I think Alabama's pretty pleased with the move.
Alabama adding Trezmen Marshall from the transfer portal from the National Champs, the former four-star, and this is an article that you wrote, Clint. Recruit spent 4 seasons in Athens, playing a total of 247 snaps in 24 games. Of those snaps and games, 170 and 14 of those came this season, which led to 19 tackles, 4.5 tackles for a loss, a sack, and an interception. We've seen this before in the transfer portal with Alabama. When they go into the transfer portal, and I think that's how it works pretty much for every single program, you're going for an immediate impact player, a guy that can really step in. And as you mentioned, with Jalen Moody and Henry To'oTo'o exiting out of the program, you have Deontay Lawson, who, by the way, I think we're both really big fans of. And there's some other younger guys in there with less experience. But when you look to the defensive side and just adding Trezmen, there's been a lot of news because you have Pete Golding, who is the linebackers coach. He's going to Ole Miss. You don't even have an inside linebackers coach right now or a DC, but you're able to still add Trezmen Marshall. Clint, I wanted to get your take on a big flex by Alabama yesterday. $1.9 billion generated from current players in the NFL, former players in the NFL. Clearly, that is still a huge indicator why these players want to become part of the process, right? We've seen Jermaine Burton last year transfer over, Jahmyr Gibbs, Eli Ricks, and the transfers that are coming in. I mean, clearly it's about the program, it's about the process, but also it's about the expectations to play among the best and then to reach their ultimate goal in the NFL. I mean, talk about, from your perspective, how big that play is. And there's a reason why Alabama creates those type of graphics with that statistical data.
Absolutely. Everything that Alabama does, whether it be graphic standpoint or, a lot of what Nick Saban says in press conferences and interviews, he's always pitching the program, always be selling, right? ABS is an age adult, saying that a lot of people have used over the years. And Nick Saban has mastered that. And I think that really at this point, you almost don't have to sell the program, but he still does. And he still brings up and he finds creative ways to do that. I mean, if you're a recruit and you see $1.9 billion, I mean, that's an absurd number. And, if you're a player who's entering the transfer portal and you've got a lot of talent, some guys are looking for more playing opportunity. But then you've also got Henry To'oTo'o, who was already kind of the leader of the defense in Tennessee. You had Eli Ricks, who is already a starting cornerback in Baton Rouge. And yet they want to make a move to a program like Alabama because they feel like it's going to be their best opportunity and best fit to position themselves the best for the NFL. And so it's definitely always going to be a program that really has that appeal, especially as long as Nick Saban continues to be the head coach. But then you look at Marshall and a lot of people, I've seen, people talking about him being the backup. And I think that has a lot to do with the talent that Georgia has had in its inside linebacker room. Nakobe Dean was one of the best linebackers in the country the last couple of years. He moved on, but they have some young guys who were able to step up and really take over that spot. Marshall's dealt with multiple injuries throughout his career. And I also don't want people to forget, there was also another guy who's kind of buried on the depth chart at his particular position. His name was Jamison Williams at Ohio State. Now, I'm not saying that Marshall's going to be Jamison Williams, the equivalent, the defensive equivalent, but I do want people to understand sometimes, a player is good enough to start or good enough to make a bigger impact, but it's just, finding an opportunity to get on the field. It's difficult. So I'm not, he's not a shoe in or a sure thing to be a starter, but I definitely think he can help this Alabama team.
Here with Clint Lamb of Bama Insider, you can check out the full coverage, what it means with Marshall being added to Alabama's now roster. I think it's 26 early enrollees, which is really incredible for the Alabama Crimson Tide going into the 2023 season. Clint, remember, it used to be like 12 was impressive. Now we're up to like 26. Really incredible. I want to switch gears here for a second and just kind of put a cap on this. So Alabama lands transfer Trezmen Marshall from Georgia. He's already enrolled. Like and subscribe. We appreciate you guys being here. Clint, yesterday I talked with Jimmy Stein, and we were discussing Bill O'Brien interviewing for the Patriots. And we've seen that for a long time. Even Chris Lowe subtweeted and was like, yeah, that's to be expected. This is probably the likely situation for Bill O'Brien. When we look to potential offensive coordinators to replace Bill O'Brien, we were talking pre-show, it seems like it's a little bit more difficult to put our finger on the pulse of the offensive coordinator position. There's a lot of names out there that people want to throw that are fun to talk about. In your perspective and kind of wrapping your head around this, and we've all had time to do it, who are some realistic names that jump to mind when we look to a potential replacement for Bill O'Brien?
Man, there's so many potential names, but with the defensive coordinator, you kind of already had an idea of the direction that it could go. Like Schumann made a lot of sense. Jeremy Pruitt made a lot of sense. The fact that, in most cases, Jim Leonard wouldn't have made sense, but the fact that he had the falling out with, Wisconsin, and he was available and he's one of the best defensive coordinators in college football. That was obviously a name that a lot of people connected. You've got guys like Todd, Grantham, who has been a defensive coordinator in the SEC. Don't really think that he's going to be the guy, but you see all these names and they just all make sense. Offensive coordinator is a lot more difficult, right? I mean, you're already seeing a lot of the names that were popping up are really being checked off the list. Like, a guy like Kendall Briles might have been brought up. A guy like Garrett Riley, a guy like Cliff Kingsbury, who's now in Thailand, living it up, with his $20 million and his beautiful girlfriend or wife or whatever she is, like he's probably not going to be available. Tom Herman would be a name that would have gotten brought up, but he's at FAU. So you start trying to figure out, okay, which direction could they go? And I think Dan Mullen is a possibility. I think, a Jeff Lebby, you got Joe Brady, you got Casey Woods, the offensive coordinator at SMU. Brian Johnson is, the quarterback's coach for the Philadelphia Eagles. He's done some great work with Jalen Hurts. There's some familiarity there as far as, if you're looking at Mullen, Brian Johnson might be a possibility on that front. So I think there are a lot of different names. It's just really hard to pinpoint or peg which direction they'll go on that front compared to defense coordinator, which seems to be heading in just a couple of directions.
Here with Clint Lamb of Bama Insider. Now, I think it's important to note that Alabama, if Bill O'Brien, when he does take the leap to wherever he's going to go, probably in the NFL, it's important for people to know two things. Bill O'Brien works with the quarterbacks. So you have to think from an offensive coordinator perspective, someone that's got to come in, probably going to work with the quarterbacks. We see Steve Sarkisian, he worked with the quarterbacks, and then Bill O'Brien. So we've seen kind of that in play. But another name that Alabama also just recently lost in the quarterback room is Alex Mortensen. And he was kind of a behind the scenes type guy for that quarterback room, but was kind of like the quarterback magician. A lot of people have a lot of respect for him. And I believe that he's going to UAB to be an assistant coach. So you're losing some firepower in that regard. So I think when you look to offensive coordinators, you have to also have someone that's going to be able to develop the quarterbacks. And Clinton, you and I just recently talked about the quarterback room and the guys returning and that it's an open battle for that position. So I think when you look to offensive coordinators, you have to also pair that with somebody who does have quarterback experience. Would you agree with that assessment, being that it's pretty much obvious that Bill O'Brien working with the quarterbacks and Steve Sarkisian before that also worked with the quarterbacks?
Absolutely. I think that that's absolutely huge. And Dan Mullen certainly has experience and is kind of known for being a good quarterback developer. Jeff Lebby, the same way. Joe Brady did some good work, throughout his career. Alex Atkins, the offensive coordinator for Florida State. Now they're an up and coming program. I don't know if Atkins would be willing to leave Florida State, but that would be a guy that I would target if I was Alabama, if it were me. I'm not Nick Saban, and he's still kind of an up and comer, so I'm not sure that would work out. But I think the work that he's done with Jordan Travis this year was simply outstanding. You saw a lot of growth and development. He was a good running quarterback, but just the ability to throw the football consistently. If you want a guy who can come in and maybe get the most out of a Jalen Milroe style of quarterback, I think a guy like Atkins would certainly be somebody that I would look at. Brian Johnson, he is the quarterbacks coach with the Philadelphia Eagles, like I said, and he's done some great work with Jalen Hurts. So that would be another potential name. But I do think it is very important because in college football nowadays, that I think Alabama wants to get back to running the football with more consistency and with more authority. But at the same time, with the way that the game is structured now, it's built around quarterback, that position.
Yes.
And so you've got to bring in a guy who can develop that and get the most out of that, position group or position room. And I think that there are plenty of possibilities out there. That's a big reason why a lot of people were big, Alabama fans were big on bringing in Dan Enos, because he did some great work with Leah Tungavaloa. Unfortunately, he's going to be moving on and will be, I think, going to Arkansas, if I'm not mistaken, to replace Kendall Briles. I think that was the last report. I don't know if that's true or accurate or how far along that is. But yeah, I definitely think developing quarterbacks is a very important factor in all this.
All right. I'm going to throw up another segment for you, Clint, because I think this one is fun to talk about. Theoretically, looking down the road, Alabama has a chance to not only have the number one pick in the NFL draft if Bryce Young goes number one, but also on the basketball side with the things that Brandon Miller has been doing in Alabama basketball. Their next game is Saturday against Missouri. Very tough place to play, but Alabama is 16-2 overall, 6-0 in conference play, 7-game winning streak, 9-0 at home, 5-0 on the way, 2-2 in neutral court settings. Bryce Young, Brandon Miller. Talking about the brand that adds for Alabama overall, but do you think it's realistic? Let's start with Bryce. Do you think he's going to be the number one pick? There could be some trades made. I know we're a long way from the NFL draft, but it's fun to talk about. And then on the basketball side, what you've seen from Brandon Miller and this basketball team, because it's really, really incredible. Never seen it happen in Tuscaloosa, and to kind of get a taste of it is very, very exciting.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's very cool to be able to say that, because especially coming from a program or excuse me, I guess a school like Alabama, where the number one overall pick in football, that doesn't, that there's been plenty of first round picks under Nick Saban. There has not been a number one overall pick. And so that even having that possibility is big on that front. But then you bring in the basketball aspect, and Alabama has been known a lot more as being a football school. And you've got Brandon Miller, that's pretty special as well. And with Bryce Young, he should be the number one overall pick. That's not me covering him and me being biased in any sort of way. I think he is the best quarterback in this draft. I understand from a tools perspective, Will Levis, there's a lot to like. There's a lot to like about Anthony Richardson, but at the same time, you're hoping for Josh Allen, with Will Levis. You're hoping that, just the arm strength and the mobility and the size and all that stuff just comes together perfectly. You've got to have the right system in place, the right guys in place to be able to develop that talent. In the NFL, you very rarely get the Josh Allens of the world. There's a reason he was like the fourth or fifth quarterback taken in that draft. And it was because, at his best at Wyoming, I watched him a lot. Very Aaron Rodgers-esque as far as his throwing ability on the move, and which would pinpoint accuracy and things like that. But at the same time, for every Josh Allen that has been developed, there's been 10, failures on trying to get the max out of that raw, tools quarterback. I understand there's size limitations and there's concerns on that front, but I think Bryce Young, outside of the fluky injury that happened with his shoulder, he's done a very good job of protecting himself and keeping himself healthy despite his lack of size. He knows when to run the football. He knows when to slide, when to get out of bounds, when to throw it away, for the most part. And, I think he's going to end up being a heck of a quarterback for somebody, and just the locker room factor that he brings as well. Everything that you would want from a mentality standpoint and having the right mindset and the right approach. And then Brandon Miller, is certainly bringing that edge. I mean, Bryce Young is in his third season, right? Brandon Miller was playing high school basketball last year. Like what he's able to do right now is just simply incredible, and it's been a lot of fun to watch.
Here with Clint Lamb of Bama Insider. Definitely hit the thumbs up, like, subscribe. Or just, I wanted to pitch that to you because it's really incredible to see, Alabama with that opportunity. I think the stat that stands out to me is that Alabama's never had a #1 pick under Nick Saban, which is really crazy to think about. We threw that number out, 1.9 billion, but still not the #1 pick. I mean, it would be amazing to see Bryce Young go #1. I think we would all certainly enjoy watching that. And then Brandon Miller, of course, the things that he's done is just really, really incredible. Be sure and hit the thumbs up, like, subscribe. We appreciate you. Wanted to jump on here last night as a group. We were the news came out about Trezmen Marshall, so we elected to go live today and to talk about a defensive player being added from the transfer portal. Another player from Georgia joins Alabama. You can read more about it on Bama Insider. Definitely like all our content right here. Hit the thumbs up, and most importantly, hit the bell to subscribe so you're notified every single time that we drop a video right here on Bama Insider. He's Clint Lamb. I'm Kyle Henderson, along with Jimmy Stein, Joseph Hastings, and Andrew Bone, all part of Bama Insider. We'll see you next video right here on BamaInsider.com.